Subscribe for my channel Amol Ujagare and hit the bell icon for latest update.
Okay, so today we are going to see the exception handling. So at so many times or at several places you might have seen like try catch, this try catch block, right? Or till now we whatever we have learned, you might have several times you might have seen that I'm telling you to do the alter enter and it handles the exception, add exception signature, right? So alter plus enter. So many times I've told you to do alter enter or use suggestions. So right, so use suggestions, and it gives you options like add exception signature, right, or use try catch block. And you might have also observed that besides the main function or any other method, for example some method, you might have got this like throws IO exception or something like that. So what is this throws? What is this try and catch, and why we are going to use this? Right? Why do we use this usually? So these are the things we are going to touch today. Actually, why we use this try catch block or throws clause, right? So we use this for handling the exception, right? So now what is the exception? Exception in general. When I ask you, define exception in simple language, simple English language. So what will you say? What is exception? For example, in general, I'm trying to tell you. If suppose outside your house there is, let's say, in the curfew now, right? There are nobody, right? But you see some people there. But it is a rare case, right? It is an exception, right? Sometimes they may come, right? So this is an exception. They may come or they may not come, right? And if it is a strict curfew, then you should then your police or your government should handle that exception, right?
Yeah.
So,
One second.
hi,
One
yes.
second. Here. I asked her. You can see if she's replying. Yeah. I'm sorry. I need to take care of something.
Okay. So similarly, on some similar note, we have exception in programming, right? So what do exceptions do? They do interrupt the program. They may interrupt the program, right? And we need to handle that. And how that we will see with the help of some examples, right? So let's take one example. Java exception example. Public static void main. Okay, suppose I have an integer a is equal to 10, then I have integer b is equal to, let's say, 5. I then I again have a variable c, and c is equal to 8 divided by b, right? And I'm trying to print this c. So division is okay. So division is c. Now when I run this program, the line by line things will get executed, right? So this is where the whole program is executed. So I'll debug this. Every statement is executed. You can see the control has flown smoothly, right? But see, when I saw value here 0, p is equal to 0, there is no error here. You don't see any red line here, or in short, you don't have any compile time error. But if you try to run this program, it says exception in thread main java.lang.arithmetic exception, that is divided by 0. So what is happening here is that when you try to run this program, control is here, then it comes here, then and it will come out of this program, right? The next statement will not get executed, right? You see, the control has not come here, it has gone somewhere else. So this line is suspected, right? So this line may throw exception, it may not throw exception. It will depend upon the runtime conditions, right? Whatever the values of b is, actually dividing by 0 is not possible, right? So in this particular case, the value of b is 0, and when I'm trying to divide it by 0, I'm getting an exception. So what does exceptions means? Practically, it loses the control from the program, right? It breaks the control, right? And the further statements, whatever are there, are not executed. So what we need to do? We need to handle the exception, right? So handling the exception can be done in two ways. One is try catch and one is using throws clause. So we will see one by one. Let us see if we use try and catch. So you use try, surround these curly brackets between the statements where you suspect the things may go wrong, right? And then you write catch. Okay, so inside this catch you have to write like this: exception e, right? So exception is a class and e is the object of it. Actually there are so many classes of exception. uh, Basically throwable is the parent of the exception, like this is a java.lang class. Object is a child of java.lang class. Then throwable is the first exception class, which is child of object. And throwable has such a hierarchy, right? It has a child of exception. Exception has runtime exception, other exceptions. Then there are errors, right? There are so many things, but everything you don't need to remember, right? Just few are enough, and I'll tell you as and when we will come across it. So exception, it's okay if you just write exception e. So in case if this line or any of the line that is written inside this try block throws an exception, right? Means in short, that line does something that causes program to lose the control. So if you use try catch block, it doesn't loses the program's control completely. The control goes inside the catch block, right? And whatever you have written inside the catch block, that will be executed, right? So earlier you saw when we didn't have this try catch block, we had an exception. So when we run this, oh, what happened? There is error in some other line. Plus C. Okay. Try started. Try end. Catch started. Catch end. C is independent. Why is there error? Okay. It is saying, it is asking me to initialize it. Right. So now I have initialized it. Let's run this program. Okay. So this is an exception. Division is 0. 0 actually the value that is initialized to C. This is getting printed, but the program is not getting loosened. So if suppose there is no try catch block, same thing that we have seen earlier. You see exception in thread main java.lang.arithmetic exception by 0. Actually see, this exception is actually catched with the help of this object exception e, and I'll tell you how. This is fine, you can write anything inside the catch block and it will be executed once the exception is thrown. But if you want to print this kind of message also along with your other statements, so you can simply print this object like this: system.out.println e. Yes, so e java.lang.arithmetic exception by divide by 0. So this is the complete message. This the same message we have seen earlier when there was no handling of the exception. right? So E contains the value of the exception, and it states that java.lang.arithmetic exception divide by 0. If you want to print the all stack trace means all the error message, you have a function a.print stack trace. So using this, you see, so same earlier message is printed along with the line number and all that, right? So this is how you see so many times when your program fails, you see something uh, uh, in this console, in the red lines, right? So somewhere you see this uh, blue line wherein you click and you go to the particular line and you see that there is some problem, right? So this is what the exception is. So whenever you find this or the things like this, it means that your program has thrown an exception, and we try to figure out what kind of exception is that, right? So you can see this with the help of this line exception in thread main, or some line is written over here. So these are some particular types of exception with the help of by just reading it, um, we may judge what kind of exception it can be, right? So this is one way. One more thing I would like to show you is that we have e.get message. E.get message, what is this? This is just a message by 0, divide by 0, right? Let's comment this, right? So this is the exception, this is printed, then by 0 e dot get message. Because of e dot get message, you got this by 0, divide by 0, divide symbol by 0, then division is 0 is because of this, right? So in this way we can handle the exception using try catch block, right? So let's take one more example. If suppose you have an array in, let's say, arr is equal to, if suppose I'll show you both the way. I have a size of it as, let's say, 3, and we are trying to insert arr values into it, right? 0, 1, then 2, 3, right? What is the size of it? 3, right? If you try to set values up to this, there will be no issue. The other thing will get executed. Everything is getting executed without any issue. When I try to insert a value at the fourth location, which is not actually there, what will happen? Exception in thread main java.lang.array index out of bound exception at line number 3 or 3. Its size is 3 and you are trying to insert the fourth value, right? So it also gives you the link wherein you can click here and you can get your cursor there where from where the exception has been thrown, right? So this is how we get the exception, and you can even try this. Okay, so let's just forget about this. Okay, now this is the thing we have written inside the try, and let's try to see the what is the output. No, try catch. Okay, this is because of this previous earlier statement, right? So not because here it is handled perfectly. ARR3. This error was because of the earlier thing, right? So I think this simple exception will also work. Okay, and let's see. We don't get message, and this is a exception. I'll also comment this. Right. So this is the exception, and just a message 3 is printed. Right. If you want to get that message also along with this information, you can write this e.print stack trace. Right. So along with these two test statements, you have got the real exception lines as well, from where you can go or move your cursor towards the line where the exception has been thrown. Right. So this is how the exception is handled. I'll show you one more type of exception. Right. So you have seen the date. Right. We have seen date. Let's say date is equal to new date. Right. What we will do is we will take some string date str is equal to, let's suppose, 12, then 04 2020, and let's try to convert this date using simple date format. Simple date format, let's say sd is equal to new simple date format, and we need to give the pattern of it. It is, let's say, dd slash mm slash yy, and what you do after that, you say sd dot parse. Okay, you say sd dot parse, and you pass the date str, right? So you just forget this for this time. Add exception. Those clause I'm going to explain you. Don't worry about that. So right. So you have written um, or you have converted this string into the date, right? So just in case if you want, you can print this as well. Let's keep this in the comment for now. Okay. So I'm just uh, demonstrating you the normal program, right? And if suppose there is space over here, right? So the pattern will have a mismatch, and you can see that exception in thread main java.text.parse exception. This is a parse exception, unparsable date, right? So this is another example of exception wherein you can see at this line there is an exception, while calling this function or this method you got an exception, right? So you can handle this also. So the lines, let's say these are the two lines where I suspect that there could be an exception, right? So what I'll do is, or I'll simply say this. I'll put this line after this try catch, that is printing the date. That needs to be initialized. Initially it is not. Okay, fine. So now I am handling the exception. So inside the try there is simple date format and this date, right? And inside this catch there are the custom messages, right? So this is an exception and unparsable date. These are the custom messages. Null is printed because we have set date to null here, right? So this is the output. This is exception unparsable date, right? If you want to print the actual error message also, then you can remove this comment and you print this message. So this message is also printed, right? So this is all about the try catch block. So now, just now we have seen that earlier before writing this code inside the try block, it was here. Let's say it was here, right? And this throws pass exception was not there. And you see a red line over here. What it says?
Mhm.
It says unhandled exception java.text.parse exception, right? So if you write it inside the try block, it will be handled. There will be no error, and you also
Yeah.
don't need to do the alter enter, and the throws parse exception will not come here, right? And everything will happen smoothly. In case if you don't put it into the try catch, then the statements, actually they know themselves that yes, I can throw the exception because somebody may give me some wrong format. I'm telling you particularly for this example. So this particular function or method knows that sometimes the user may give me some wrong pattern by mistake, right?
Mm.
And if that pattern is wrong, I will not be able to parse this string. Right? I should get the correct pattern, right? So if this is going to happen, I should inform the method wherein I am used, right? So the parse is used in main method. So I should inform the main method that I may throw exception if I got the pattern wrong, right? So we write like this, throws parse exception. So this method knows that one of the line from its code may throw the parse exception, but it doesn't handle the exception, right? It just informs the method that I may throw the exception. Now you see what you want to do, but it doesn't handle the exception. You see, if suppose there is a wrong pattern here and I try to run, this throws will not help us. The exception is thrown anyway. Anyway, the exception is thrown. What does this throws pass exception did? It just informed the main method that I am going to throw the exception, right? So we need to write throws over here. Okay. Let me just remind one more example wherein you need to have such a file not found actually. When you try to read a file, at that time also you need to throw some exception. Let's try that. File input string, let's say fp is equal to new file input string, and let's say some path of some file. Okay, path. See here, there is again a red line here. If you move your cursor over there, it says unhandled exception java.io.file not found. This is actually a constructor, right? And which is a method as well. So this method knows that user may give me some wrong file path, right? And if that file is not found, then what to do, I don't know, right? So I may throw an exception. So I must inform my method that if the user gives me wrong path, I may throw an exception, right? So when you say alternator and add exception, it says either surround me with the try catch or add exception method signature, right? So if you write it inside the try catch, there will not be any issue, right? Because it knows that I'm inside the try block means I'm safe. Even if the user gives the wrong path, wrong file path, I will go to the catch block, right? Even if I throw the exception, there is no issue. I will go to the catch block. But if I am not surrounded with the try catch block, I must inform my method wherein I am written that I can throw an exception if user gives me wrong path. So this throws file not found exception. Exception is fine, right? I'll also show you by throwing some exception. Let's say I'll write some wrong path or a wrong file name. Let's say, okay, I'll put some random value here, and this path actually does not exist, right? So let's run this. Unparsable date. Okay, I'll comment this date part first. Now we just have this file, the line of file inside this try block, right? Wherein I have a wrong path, and I am printing if this throws exception, I'll print catch. This is an exception, and I'll print the custom. I will print the simple message that it shows. So run this program. See, this is an exception, and it says this. The system cannot find the path specified, right? Because I've given this random value here, and it generated the wrong path. So this path actually does not exist, right? So the system cannot find the path specified, right? And if you want to see the custom message or the real message, e dot print stack trace. file not found exception and all that. This is a stack trace we call. It's the complete message. The complete message is called a stack trace. The complete, complete message. This is the complete message. We call it as stack trace. The complete message or the whole message or the whole error message, better I'll say. The complete message is called as stack trace. Okay. So what is the advantage of this try catch? If suppose I have some statements after the line where I I am amol, I am taking Java class. So the things after the statement, I print comment this and let's run this. Okay. So these statements are executed the even if this statement has thrown an exception, right? If suppose you don't, if you have not used this try catch block, or this is outside the try catch block, let's see what happens. It has given me the exception in thread means control came here, and further statements are not executed. Means these are the two statements. These were the two statements, and these are not executed because it loses the control from the program from this line itself, right? So this is the actually use of handling the exception using try catch block, especially the if this statement is not getting executed because of the exception, let it be, let it not get executed, but let me just execute the other statement at least, right? If you don't want to get executed, you don't execute, but let me execute the further statements after you. So the try catch blocks help us in that. Okay. So this is a pass exception. Hi, I'm Amol. I'm taking Java class. So the further statements are executed. Okay. What we called exception is actually if some lines are not getting executed and they are losing the control from the program, we call them exception, right? And exception handling is we don't let them to lose the control of the program. Is exception handling, right? So this is the try catch and throws clause we discussed about. And we will see one more keyword. Actually, this question is asked every time in the interview. What is the difference between throws and throw keyword? Right. So for that, we will just see some another exception example. One public static void main. Suppose I'm writing a method public void my method. Now here I'm just writing some simple code. Let's say if um, there could be some condition. Let's say if I is equal to 0, and if say I is equal to 0, then system.out.println print 0, and else, now see carefully what I'm doing, else throw, else throw exception, else throw new exception, I will not print 0. I have created one user defined exception. So this message or this exception is actually does not exist. Exception class is there, but this message is user defined. User defined exception. Suppose I'll create a object of this class ob is equal to new and ob dot my method. Let's say 0. Let's throw then handle exception. So after running this program, we got output as 0, right? And if suppose the value is not 0, it says exception in thread main. I will not print 0. You see, if I wanted that my method should throw some user defined exceptions, so I use this keyword throw, right? How do we use this? Throw, then new, and you can write any kind of exception, not necessarily this particular exception. You can write, let's say, throws array index out of bound or arithmetic exception as well, right? So here the message will come like that. This is an arithmetic exception, and I will not print 0. Like this. Okay. So what we learned in this class is actually the topic is exception handling. Then first thing we saw the try catch block. Then we saw throws example. Then we saw throw. Throws just informs the method that this method is going to throw the exception.
Okay.
There is only the similarity in the word throw and throws. Actually, the context is totally different. Throw is using throw, you can write some user defined exceptions. Okay, and try catch blocks actually handles the exception. Throws does not handle the exception. It just informs the method that this method is going to throw the exception. So this was all about the exception handling, and I hope you got this. So thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, please hit the like button, and if you have still not subscribed to my channel, please do subscribe. Thank you very much.